Hey, how's it going? And I'm excited to bring you this tutorial today. I'm just exploring this plugin, this time warp plugin, and honestly, it was kind of messing with my mind. But it has a potential to create something like super slow motion, such that you might have a bullet time effect, and so I thought it was worth exploring. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through some basic things, and then you can try exploring on your own. So right now I just have a Mixamo character loaded in, and we're just in the perspective view, and I have him animated. He's looping a little bit, and this is about a 60 frame animation right there. You see him? He's getting his exercise in. He's getting more exercise than I am. The time warp, there's a couple different things about it I'll show you. To get to it, you just have to make sure you're on the camera, and then you hit M, and then you go add modifier, and it's down here on the bottom under time warp, and I already have it on. If you enable it and then double click it, then you get these options here. This was just frustrating the heck out of me. I believe when it came in by default, I actually crashed my system and had to reinstall LightWave. When it's blue like that, that means there's already stuff on the graph, so I can click on it and it's just coming in. For some reason it remembers this animation that I did. I'm not sure how to clear it out of the system, but to start fresh, we just have to hold down Shift and click that, and now it clears the graph editor, and we can jump in. This time warp thing, it can slow down time, it can speed up time, it can travel back in time. It can do all these things. To walk you through what you're supposed to do is, one of the things I recommend is if you hit D, you want to set your frames to fractional frames, and you'll notice that change down here on the timeline, and that's one of the big things, is you can do that. I guess it provides a higher level of accuracy. And then if we go back into, oops, I just need to hit M, sorry about that, M, and go back in here. Here's the good news. I'm going to try to simplify this. The subframes is basically, I look at it as like almost like an accuracy setting. So they set 10 isn't too bad. It's the difference between the scene frames, the down here, and the rendering frames. So that's I guess the big differential is you've got scene frames and you've got rendering frames, and normally those are just 1-to-1. So the rendering frame 14 is recording the scene frame 14. The time warp messes with that, I guess the rendering frame portion of that equation, so it's not 1-to-1, and then it allows you to slow things down, and I'll show you how I finally figured this out. One of the things you can do just to make your life easy is this first one, warp blur, and there's just one called fixed camera, and those only apply if you have motion blur on. So I don't have motion blur on, so you can actually just forget about these two unless you have motion blur on. And then warp camera, basically if warp camera is off, camera motion is a function of the render time and not the scene frame time. So for what that's worth, I guess you're not going to get any motion blur from the actual movement of the camera, so I guess you don't have to worry about that either, because the camera in this case isn't even moving. So I guess you can just have all these off. The only thing that you really need to get your mind around is this graph editor, and this is what I struggled with, and I do have a couple of things to show you. So on this one, it's a very short animation. The guy in front is actually time warped, and the guy in back is running at the normal Mixamo animation speed. So you can get these really super incredible slow motion effects, and I think that's why they're saying you can get a bullet time effect with this. Seeing that, you see that? Now the other thing I'll show you is on this one, and this is how I figured this whole thing out, is I went into the graph editor. So on the left here is actually the scene frame numbers. I didn't realize, I don't know what I was thinking, but these are actually your scene frame numbers. So if you have a 240 frame scene, then this is going to be 240 here. So these are actually represents your actual scene frame numbers. So if it says 120 here, it's your 120th frame. And then here is your rendering. It's really fascinating. You just have to get your mind around it, but normally this is a 1-to-1 equation. I guess it's going up, and the rendering is always increasing along the x because it's a rendering machine, so it's just constantly incrementing. Whereas your scene frames, and this is where I finally realized how you get the slow motion out of it, is if you just, I'll play this and you'll just watch the box. See how it goes back? That's these humps here, right? See that? So it's going up here. And now I'm actually going back in scenes. Now I'm going back up and back in scenes and back up. See? See that? That's how I realized. So what would happen is, in a normal rendering, you'd have 120 render frames, let's say, and 120 scene frames. But if I flatten this, let's just jump into LightWave and I'll show you this. I'll show you in the graph editor. It probably makes more sense. If I hit here and go into the graph editor now, so you see it's misleading because if you look over here, this is a 60 frame scene. If you look over here, you can see this. I'm not anywhere near where I need to be, so I have to come over here to this telescope and drag it all the way. I mean, keep dragging, dragging, dragging. So this number over here could get huge depending on your scene, but let's say it's only 60 frames. So let's say I'm right there. So this actually represents my scenes. These numbers down here, let me hit A. These numbers down here, see I messed up my, every time I do that. So let me just drag it back down. So these numbers represent your scene frames, your actual scene frames. And these can be fractionalized even for greater accuracy. And then these represent your rendering frames. There's 60, I guess 60 rendering frames. So I understood that the LightWave only can render at whole scene numbers. So, but up here you can be recording at fractionalized numbers. So if I come here and I hit a keyframe here, this is going to, if you just put in 60, like if I just, let's say for the heck of it, let me come here and put this on 60, a value of 60 here. Nothing's really going to happen. It's going to be rendering out at, oh, you know what it's going to do? It's just going to render the 60th frame all the way across. That's what that's going to do, right? So then if I come over here and I move this, can I drag this down? And I drag it down, this is pretty much like a normal, this would be like a normal render then. It's going to be one frame, two frame, going across in a straight line. But if I want super slow motion, I can pull this down. And now, over the course of 60 frames or whatever, I'm only going to be to like the 10th frame. So it's going to be super, super slow motion. So I think this is where you would get your bullet time effect. So anyway, I hope you found this helpful. I'm just diving into this. I didn't see any other tutorials about the time warp on here. So as I find out a little bit more and I get any other tips, I'll be sure to let you know. So thanks for watching. Take care and have a great day.